Hello everyone, welcome back to Ion Radio. I'm John, and today we have another episode of Backseat Admiral. I'm going to wait for it to all catch up with me live and to make sure my mic is working this week. So if you're in chat and you can hear me, let me know. So today is Sunday, October 3rd, 2021, and we're going to be discussing episode 3 of our season 2. This was an interesting battle. We both have two big bruiser ships. Ken has a bunch of fighters, and I have flotillas to be my support. So, sound is good. Thank you very much, Ken, who is in chat today. So, again, I apologize. I don't have an in-depth strategy talk for you guys this week. Again, I'm still in the process of moving. It's at least moving forward now, which is good. So, excited about that. So, let's take a look at the lists and start breaking things down. So, this week we have myself flying an Akbar list, and Ken is flying a Grievous list that was provided by us by one of our Patreon members, RedSpec01. And we'll go ahead and take a look at that fleet first. So this fleet, as you can see here, it is a Providence, a Recusant, and a bunch of fighters. And that is it, but it has a few tricks in it to go along the way. So Grievous, we all know who Grievous is and how we can run fighters off the board and recover things now. So he's a cheap admiral. This is a Providence carrier. It has Flight Commander, which allows you to drop fighters or activate fighters after you've done your move, which will become very important in a second. His early warning system as its defensive retrofit. It ends up working quite well here. Again, it's just very difficult to bring early warning system on ships that are Republic or CIS when you have the option of bringing thermal shields, because thermal shields are just so very, very powerful. Next, you have Expanded Hangar Bay. And then Ordnance Pod, so if you come up against fighters, you can flak them after you've already shot. Which works well when you take in consideration what the next card is, which is Invisible Hand. So this is the first time Invisible Hand has been used on our channel, so let's go ahead and read through it and come up with some ideas on how to use it. So Invisible Hand is an expensive title. It costs 9 points. It reads, while deploying fleets, if you are in the play area, so deploy your Providence first. When you would deploy a squadron with Swarm, you may set aside a squadron next to your ship card instead. You may set up to 5 squadrons in this way, and then Squadron Command. For each squadron you would activate this command, you may place one of your set aside squadrons within distance 3. It cannot move this activation, and if it has AI, increase its AI value by 1. So let's break down what that means. So the whole thing. So we've already seen cards like, actually I don't know if we've seen them on this channel, like Reserved Hangar Bay. And that allows you to store fighters inside your ship and then deploy them afterwards. So this card, Invisible Hand, is why Flight Commander is on this card. So you can move your ship into position and then spew out fighters everywhere to attack ships, mainly attack fighters. But there's a little rule that it has to be a swarm fighter. Unlike rapid launch bays, though, you get to still use it as an activation. So your big ship is out, but you can now deploy fighters to the ship instead of how rapid launch bays is before deployment. You set aside. So let's say if you were to set aside 4 squadrons, instead of that being 2 deployments, that's just set aside completely with rapid launch base. So this allows you to use those squadrons still as deployments to try to out-deploy your opponent if you wanted to. So now the next one, part of this, is how to get them out, and that is with the squadron command. You would place them out. It's the same thing. So you place all of them out, and then you can activate them if you wish. And this, though, if you read your set-aside squadrons within distance 3, well, this is the problem with this. It's only distance 3. So that means you cannot deploy them at 1 or 2. They have to be distance 3, that little distance 3 away from your ship. So it's like a donut around your ship is where you can deploy these, which really could limit how you could put these fighters out. Like, you can put them out at a decent range, but they have to be out of that range. And depending on how they're placed out, if a fighter is touching you, you might not be able to actually attack it because of the distance between your ship. And then when you get to attack with it, treat its AI as one more. So if you drop a vulture out, boop, blue-black. AI, add a black in. This says you could add another dice in with AI. So then a vulture could be attacking with a black, 3 blacks, a blue. So 4 dice on a vulture, which makes it pretty sweet. Like, you can just do some serious damage with anti-squadrons with this. Especially if you were to, like, put it on a ship that has a flight controller, then you could be hitting, like, 5 dice with a vulture. That's 8 points, which might be something I might be trying in the future. But, yeah. So, Expanded Hangars allows you to deploy 5 because Invisible Hand allows you to set aside 5. Flight Commanders allows you then to activate and place all of them at the same time. This whole build for this works quite well together as like a drop-off bomb. So you just missile it in, drop it all off. The second ship is your Recusant Support Destroyer. It also has Flight Commander, Flight Controllers, Expanded Hangar Bay, and Boosted Comms. So this ship is mainly just there to command the squadrons that are not stuck inside the Providence and give them increase of blue dice against ships with the Flight Controllers. And personally, I'm not necessarily sold on Flight Commander being on this ship because the Recusant wants to be more at range. You already got boosted comms, so you pretty much should be able to activate them wherever they are. But that's the second ship, and then we get into the whole fighter swarm. And the key is you can only put fighters into the Invisible Hand that have swarm. So you're going to see a lot of swarm aces that will be dropped off. So all of these guys that are stuck in here, all the aces should be put into the ship. So you have DFS 311, DIS T81, the Haor Chal prototypes, and the Phallic Afflic prototypes. So both the Tri-Fighters and both the Vulture aces are in there. And they're just good to drop off because they got scatter. You can survive usually at least one hit with that. Then the rest of the squadrons are a Tri-Fighter, a Hyena, and a Vulture. So to put the 5 away, you can put your 4 aces away, and then you can put probably the Tri-Fighter. That's what I would put in there because that would probably come out and have the biggest amount of punch. Or you could put the Vulture. Just depends on how you feel. And then you have 4 Hyenas that are just bombers that pretty much the Recusant is commanding forward each turn. So that's the build. I really don't have much to add to it because it's a cool janky list. Like, it just does what it does. You fly in hard, and you drop fighters. Cool. I like it. And now let's get over to my Akbar list. So, kind of like that list. There's 2 big ships, and then I have support. Instead of fighters, though, I have flotillas. So the first ship is an MC-80 assault cruiser. It has Admiral Akbar on board. My officer is Intel Officer. It has 2 defensive retrofits, so I brought 2. I brought electronic countermeasures, which guarantees that I can use the brace, and then advanced projectors, which will allow me to suffer damage to a different hull zone, which is nice because it has 2 redirects and a bunch of shields. and you're probably going to be flying it sideways to get the side arc out because it's Akbar. So I can just transfer all the damage to the far shields and then switch it to the side and the front as it goes along. I have leading shots on there because red dice are red dice and they hate me. Engine tech, it allows the ship to actually maneuver because it's only speed 2, so you can actually then do pseudo speed 3 if you want with this ship. And then quad battery turrets. For the most part, it's going to be sitting slow doing its side arc because I want to be second player and make you come into me. And if you're going faster to come into me, then I get to shoot red dice at you at long range, add dice with Akbar, then I can add in dice also with quad battery turrets of blue dice, so then I can re-roll any of my red dice that are blanks, which will be most of them, with leading shots. So it kind of just all works together. And then I have Home 1, which will allow a friendly ship at distance 1 to 5 to change one dice result to a face with an accuracy. So my other ship is going to be able to get accuracies and synergy off of this ship as long as this is my main tank. Okay, so my other ship is the MC-75 Armored Cruiser, and that's because it has a decent side arc. It has 3 reds and 2 blues out the side, which works very well with Akbar because then it's 5 reds that I'm shooting. My officer is Intel Officer to try to get rid of other players' tokens. It has gunnery teams because why not shoot twice? It has proximity mines. I didn't really know what to bring, and I figured I could help control the board a little bit with them. My defensive retrofit slot is electronic countermeasures, and that is so that I can use my brace guaranteed when I need to. I also have the same shenanigans going on with this ship as I do with Home 1, which is the quad battery turrets to add a blue dice if I'm going slower than you, which I probably am because I'm going to just be slow rolling it, and leading shots to re-roll them. I have external racks, so if you get up in close with me, I'm going to just throw more dice at you. So theoretically, if you were to crash into the side of my ship, and it was a close range shot, I would be 3 red dice, 2 blue dice to start. I will add in a blue dice because I'm going slower. I will add in Akbar, which is 2 more red dice. I will add in external racks for 2 black dice, and then I could confire in whatever I wanted with rerolls with leading shots. So you could theoretically do a ton of damage if the dice actually agree with you. That's if they decide to agree with you or not. My last 2 ships, I have a GR-75 with Hondo, Comsnet, and Bright Hope. This slide might be wrong. I thought I had Leia on this one, but it doesn't really matter. They're both really just there to pass out tokens to my big ships because the big ships needs tokens because they both have ECM. They both need to be doing like concentrate fires or engineering to stay alive, and they both need to be navigating. I need like all of my tokens on every single ship every single turn for it to function properly. And then the other one is Leia, which is just so then if I get sliced, I can still survive. Those are the 2 fleets. So I'm going to go check out chat. If you have any questions on the 2 fleets, let me know. And I'll take a look at it, and then we'll get into objectives and the objectives that I have for my Akbar fleet to try to maximize what I can do with it, and then look at the deployment and how the game went on. So it looks like we have a couple people in chat. Hope you guys are all doing well. Mark, I believe last Backseat you asked me a question at the end of Backseat, and then I wasn't able to get to it just because of timing and lag and things like that. So if you did, go ahead and ask it again, and I'll try to get to it after our talk. After we finish talking about the different fleets and how the game went. Cool, glad the mic is good. So that's about it. Chat doesn't have any questions right now. So we're going to just dive right into my 3 objectives, and they are kind of classic ones. So advanced gunnery is there because the MC-80 does not have. So what does the ordnance what does the armed cruiser have over the ordnance in this list? And it comes down to upgrades, and I'm going to just pull it up on my phone just so I can see it, and I can tell you better. So it comes down to upgrades and the dice pool. So an ordnance cruiser out the side has 3 reds and 2 blacks, versus the armed cruiser, which is 3 blacks and 2 blues. So with me wanting to be able to use leading shots and have them move into me and shoot at longer ranges for longer time periods, it is more valuable to have blue dice than black dice. In addition to that, the armored cruiser has an ordnance slot, an ion slot, and a turbo laser slot, which allows me to then bring the turbo laser and leading shots on the ship, compared to ordnance, which has 2 ordnance slots, which doesn't do anything for me because it doesn't help Akbar. It helps things that are black dice, which would help Sato. So Sato would bring an ordnance cruiser, while Akbar should be bringing the armor cruiser, because then you can upgrade it with turbo lasers and ion cards. So, old battle strategist, that's why I bring an armored rather than an ordnance. It really just is just what the build is. Because for the most part, they're the same, and you would normally go with the cheaper one, because cheaper is usually better for Armada. But for this specific case, because I'm playing Akbar, it fits better into what my idea is for the build, which is throwing more dice at longer range with having the upgrade cards that are available. And then also, it has better anti-squadron dice too. So an ordnance only has a black dice, while an armed cruiser has a blue and a black, so then you can kill fighters faster, or at all. In this case, especially because I'm going fighterless. So, the objectives that I have, and I think I know what your question was. We'll get to it. So, advanced gunnery goes on the MC-80 because it doesn't have it, and you don't really want to fly into an MC-80 assault frigate with Akbar. It can obliterate your ship because it can attack the same hull zone twice. So it's just like Akbar dice. Oh, you have anything left? Akbar dice right afterwards. So for the most part, that's in there, and no one will ever pick that because that's the worst option in this list. Then you have asteroid tactics, which benefits me as the second player with no fighters because I can put the Exergoths out. And then hopefully you fly into the Exergoth field with me, and then the Exergoth will just chew your fighters up if you're going to come after me with fighters, which was my plan. As you can see, I should have deployed them a little bit differently because I was going so slow, and I'll talk about that when we get into deployment and where you see the fighters land. It wasn't necessarily ideal, but the idea was there. And then because I only have 2 big ships, if I come against something with intel, I can land on the asteroids and I can get my defense tokens refreshed and regenerated, which is always a good thing when you're trying to keep your ships alive. Solar Corona is just funny because then I can deploy anywhere I want after you've deployed, and you really won't be able to use accuracies against me, which then I don't need my ECM, but it's still there in case you do somehow manage to get a accuracy. So Ken out of this list chose asteroid tactics. I would actually agree with that pick because his idea is to fly in as a missile and then drop all of his stuff off. And if he had to deploy everything first, there was no way I was going to allow that to happen. So asteroid tactics is really the only good option for him. You can also put advanced gunnery on like the Recusant because it has that giant big front arc and you can probably ping things down twice. But all these options are pretty bad. So let's take a look then at deployment. You can see where I put the obstacles and where I put the 2 mines. The 2 mines are placed here because I want Ken to either have to come through the minefield into this, because then both my ships can shoot him, or set up over here, and I'll just wait for him on this side of the board and curve over here and ignore him. So I kind of force him into this area here to come into the side arcs of my ship, which is exactly what I wanted to do. The problem lies with he's trying to drop stuff off. I'm going speed 1, which will take me to about here. And then on turn 3, I'll be here. So it's not till like turn 3, turn 4 that the exocross are even going to be into play. So how I should have deployed the obstacles here is I should have taken this one right here, this middle one, and I should have dropped it back here, right along where this actual like debris asteroid field is on the map. So then I could have an exogoth protecting my ships here. My bad. I did not think that through. Or take this asteroid here and move it down here and have it closer. That's how I should have had it, because if you watch how the game unfolds in a second, the exogoths were like one turn off of being able to do what I wanted them to do, which was kill all of his fighters. I almost killed all of his fighters. I think at the end of the game there was one hyena on 2, a hyena on 3, and then 2 of his aces had only 1 health left. So it was very, very close to killing all of it. So a little bit of change of how I had that deployed would have helped. These mines, though, did keep him out of arc, which we talked about at the end of our battle report, after action report, how Ken jutted his Recusent over just slightly. And because of that, it was out of range, out of arc, pretty much the entire game. So, map flipped. Okay, weird. So as you can see, like, my ships barely move forward because they're not moving very fast. And I caught these fighters where the exogoths will be later on. But as you can see, look, this entire area is exposed until I get to here. And I kind of realized that, and it was just too late. But one of these obstacles should have been back here so that I could have defended my ships better. His ships are coming in hard and fast. And they're going to probably do their drop-off next turn. That's what I would bet. So then we're on to, this is the start of turn 3. And as you can see, his fighter swarm got dropped off. Well, his fighters moved here. His fighters are still inside. And so this is top of turn 2. And I'm just now moving into the asteroid field. And these guys aren't doing much to protect me when this is where the other one should have been, and then it would have been able to flak all those fighters and protect my side. This, I left myself so exposed. And then you can see, came in here, dropped off fighters right inside of this. If it was there, I could have then been double eating them. His ship is just outside of arc on this. And then we get to the point of our discussion about Ken made a mistake in this game. And I think it actually cost him the game in the end. It was both of his ships had navigates on them instead of squadrons. And I talk about this a lot, that if you're a squadron fleet, what you should be doing is squadroning no matter what. My phrase is always, it's better to die with a squadron dial and not use it than to use really anything else if you're designed to be doing squadrons. And I'll go into explaining why a lot of that is in a second. But because of that, he was going speed 3 on both of his ships, and I think he wanted to try to drop speed so that I wouldn't get extra blue dice on him. And he was also worried about flying off the table. And because he dropped his speed with a nav here, he couldn't then activate any of his fighters into me. And if you guys watch the game, you know Ken's bombers and stuff roll so hot it's not even funny. Every single red dice came up with either a hit, a crit, or a double. It wasn't like he was missing anything. So if he were to have activated with either of his ship squadrons, this MC-75 would have died. Like, completely died. And then he could then turn and focus in on my MC-80 and at least wound it. And I might not have killed the Providence. I probably would have eventually killed the Providence, but he would have gotten a good chunk of damage into my MC80 before I would have done that, or been able to, after doing that, try to heal it up or switch shield arcs or something. But that's not the case in this. So if we jump, everything's starting to die. I'm moving into the field, and the fighters are all over here because they weren't activated, and he'll have to chase me in now. And I think that's it, because after this, the fighters do get activated, and they do kill my MC-75. And throughout the entire game, I shot a bunch at the rack, and it didn't do anything, because dice luck. But actually I can pull it up. You can look at the damage. So I attacked this, I believe, 3 to 4 times with Akbar for a grand total of 1 redirected shield damage. So anytime that I shot at the rack, what I should have been doing is I should have been flacking squadrons to try to kill them all out. I should have done that from the beginning. I missed my first opportunity to use gunnery teams on my MC-75, and what I should have done is I should have flaked all the squadrons that was there. And then the second time I shot at the wreck for like 0 damage, and again, I should have just flaked out the side at the squadrons. The squadrons was what killed me in this, and I had a very good opportunity to kill all of them, and that did not take place. And then if I had the Exergoth, where I've now discussed, that's where it should have been. But back to discussing squadron versus anything else in this. So in this, we'll just go with the fact that Ken had enough ships that had black dice, let's say his Tri-Fighters and his Tri-Aces. So that's 3 right there, and then we'll throw in a Hyena. So between all of them, you should be able to get 1 damage on each ship. So that's 4 potential damage, just rolling averages pretty much, with those 3 fighters for a squadron dial. You'll see a lot of times people use like concentrate fire with big ships, and I'm very much opposed to that unless you are using gunnery teams or trying to trigger gunnery teams. But I'd rather use a token to trigger gunnery teams than a dial, and that is because that adds 1 dice compared to activating squadrons, which we could add 4 dice. So it's just like a huge damage potential type of issue. And I don't think Ken would have flown off the board going speed 3. I think he would have just been able to keep it, and he would have just shuffled barely around through here. And, I mean, this isn't a good place to be, but it would have killed my ship. So, just if you're playing squadrons, keep that in mind when you're building your command deck. Is if you're commanding squadrons, you want to command squadrons. Let's look at the final score, and while I pull up the final score, you guys start asking questions if you have any questions on the match in the comments, and I'll talk about this, then get to the comments. So the final score was pretty close because I only have 2 ships, so that's like, 50% of my fleet in each of those ships. I was able to kill off a bunch of Ken's fighters and his Providence with his commander on it. And so the score ended up being 144 to 229. I had 85 margin of victory for a 7-4. So this game was actually really close. The only thing that could have really happened is me killing more of his fighters, and we probably would have traded the same ships. I don't think anything would have happened with my MC80 against the Recusant, because the MC80 actually has an advantage because of all my defensive tech and being past tokens such as engineering. I would have just been able to heal up against it. And the way I was rolling, I wasn't doing any damage to the Recusant, so it would have just been a standstill. So if I were to have killed all of Ken's fighters off, the points really wouldn't have changed, because that's what, like 13, we'll call it 40 points, which would drop it at 120, which still would have been a 7-4. So 7-4. Cool. Going back to tokens and needing tokens, that's one of the weaknesses of this General Grievous lists, is that you're very much so dedicated into what you're wanting to do, which is squadrons, and there is no way to generate tokens, to pass tokens or to get tokens later on to slow down or speed up. So you need to know exactly what you want to be doing from the beginning of the game. So for the most part, you pretty much have to come in with your ship set to speed 3. I'm going to switch over to this. So if I were to be playing this Grievous list, I would come in with my ship set to speed 3, knowing that they're going to be flown in as a missile. My first command would be navigate, so then if I needed to, I could slow down. And then every single dial after that would be squadrons, so I could command all my squadrons to be doing exactly what they need to be, and then just fly right through. So that's how I would fly it. This Akbar list is just, he wants second place. It has 11-point bid, which is big for our channel, and I think big for the most part, seeing the current metas that I've seen recently. Most of the things have gone to being like 400 to 395 for bids, so you don't see the giant 2-ship bid of like 25 points as much anymore. So this is a respectable bid for second place, because I want you to play my objectives and play on my terms of fly to me, and then I'll shoot you at long range with Akbar. So that pretty much is it for discussing this game. Thanks again to RedSpec01 for submitting this list. It was fun. When Ken and I divide up fleets to play, this was one of the fleets I was like, I would really like to play it, but I had like other Grievous lists that I've just recently played, so it was clearly Ken's turn to one flight Grievous and next fly a Patreon fleet. But I would consider flying a variation of this. It's just different. It's very different from fleets that I normally build, and those are usually the fleets that I enjoy flying. So thank you very much for submitting it. And if lists like this are something that you would enjoy submitting to us, you could join our Patreon, and we have in the tiers of support, we'll fly lists from our Patreon members in our seasons. We're usually a little bit behind, so if like you were to submit this, it probably wouldn't get into like season 4 because of the way we plan and the way we film. So any other questions for me? And I just want to make sure, Mark, I think you asked me last time about Star Trek Attack Wing. Is that the question that you had? And if so, let me know. And I don't remember what the question was. I just thought it was about Star Trek Attack Wing. So I'll give that a second to catch up through chat. And yeah, next week, because I've been now doing a little bit of a spoiler every backseat for the next week, is going to be Dodana versus Republic Tarkin. So that's going to be a fun battle. It also has one of those rule interactions that you read on rule forums and don't really see much, so that's something to look forward to. So definitely pay attention to that game, because it has a huge outcome on how the game goes. How far ahead do you film? We try to film, so we actually did this mainly before COVID, and then we've really taken it to heart after COVID. Yeah, I saw your question, so I will answer it, Mark. So during COVID, when it hit, we locked down and we couldn't film, so Ken and I had a backlog of things. So I think we had about a month or 2 months that were already done. So that kept our channel going, because we already had it done and we didn't have to risk getting together or, all of that. So after we were able to get back together, we hit the ground running, and we try to stay at least 10 episodes-ish ahead of schedule for that. So like for BattleTech, we have BattleTech recorded through the end of the year with our one release per month. Legion we're still working on because it's new and both of us are in the process. Ken's trying to get things painted and done and his studio in his basement done. I'm moving, so I have stuff painted, but now everything's in like boxes, so I can't really do anything. Armada, we are completely done with Season 2. We are in the process of doing Season 3, and we're in the planning process of Season 4. So that's how far ahead we are. We also have ideas for things that aren't set in stone yet. So I would say confidently, Ken and I have until next June-ish sketched out of like, this is a season 5 of Armada would be here. Here's different things that we would like to do. So right now, just because all of our studios are kind of shut down or waiting to be put up, we don't have as much. But for planning wise, we're well down the road planning. So your next question is about Star Trek Attack Wing. And so that was one of my first games to get into miniature games. I'm a huge Star Trek fan, and I always wanted a Star Trek miniature game. Star Trek Attack Wing does not necessarily scratch the itch that I want it to. But like, there's debate. Like, people want Star Trek to be like Star Wars Armada, which it isn't, because Star Wars ship battle is more like World War II ship battles or World War I battles, and that's not how Star Trek is. Star Trek, actually, their ships act more like fighters, which means like the attack wing, X-wing style movement is actually better for it. So I got into Attack Wing the week that it came out, and until the current releases, like they did like a refresh of the rules and release new things, I own everything that was ever released in Attack Wing. So I have this massive collection of Attack Wing. I have all of the OP prizes, have multiple of some of them, sadly, because I was young and had money and spent it. So I won a lot. So the store that I played at had the Dominion War campaign, and I won that twice. So I enjoyed the combo wombo-ness of it. We primarily just played Faction Pure, which limits the combo wombo a little bit compared to other things. That's how I prefer to play, as Faction Pure. But yeah, I don't know if we would ever put it on the channel, because it's been now... I got out of that game when I got into Armada, so since Armada came out. So it's been 5+ years since I've played it, so I would have to like go back through, pull out all the cards. I just have all the cards in one giant, like... Actually, it's two giant, because it's a lot of cards. Thing, relearn the cards, relearn the rules for it. But yeah, I enjoy the game. One of my favorite builds I did near the end of me playing is I used the flagship OP prize card, and I put it on an Equinox. And however I had it is I would flip one shield and then regenerate all of my shields, and I had like it built up to be like 6 shields, so it was pretty much invincible. It had 6 shields that would auto-regenerate at the end of the turn, and it was rolling minimum of 5 green defense dice against each dice. So that was a lot of fun. No one found it fun because my other ship was even like, it was like a really mean like attack ship, so you didn't want to go near it. So everyone would go after the other ship, and then they would learn halfway through the game like, oh, it doesn't die. Perfect. So there's that. Let's see what else is in the chat. Ken talking pretty much what I said. And he's building terrain. Yes, I would agree. So Star Trek is actually a science fiction. So it comes down to how you define things. Like, so science fiction, I actually think whenever people start talking about, well, politics shouldn't be in science fiction, it should be about science fiction. I'm like, well, that's the whole point of sci-fi. Or at least that's my opinion. I see sci-fi as a genre of a way to translate ideas to other people about difficult subjects without necessarily saying it's the subject. Like, you could, like, literally, like, paint it the picture of this is clearly this subject, but it's not, so you can get away with it. And I always use, like, the original Star Trek. It was, like, way ahead of social issues and social opinions and things like that. Like, they had the one, don't quote me on the episode, it's the episode, the one half face was black, half face was white, and the other one was white on black, and they hated each other. And it was a story about how they were the same, they were both people, as Kirk would say, but they couldn't get along. And it was learning how to get along, this was in the 1960s, so it was clearly talking about the race issues that were going on in the United States. And I think that's what sci-fi does well. Like, if you can paint a picture of, here's a story, here's how the universe works, here's ideas. Social ideas, political ideas, and things like that. Even, like, books like Starship Trooper, it portrays ideas. It's nothing like the movie, but it has ideas and concepts that it can portray. And you get into a lot of those dystopias and utopias of ideas and how those express themselves, which is what Star Trek is, and it does that very, very well. Let that be your last battle. Yeah, see, this is why I have Ken in the chat, because he knows these things with me. This is why we're friends, when we go on to, like, just Star Trek talking rants. But yes, so Star Trek is science fiction, which isn't about space battles and everything like that as much. It's like part of the story, but it's not the story. While Star Wars is not science fiction, it is a science fiction fantasy, which is why it has, like, more related to, like, Lord of the Rings or things like that, in the way that it is a high fantasy. You have wizards and knights and lords and evil wizards and people like that in a struggle for the kingdom, if you would. And both of those play out differently on screen and in the way that the universes work. While Star Trek is a utopian version of humanity in the future, when we all get along and unite together with other groups of people that are different for bettering of society, Star Trek, or Star Wars, is about fighting good versus evil, which is a fantasy. So, long rant, but that's my opinion on those things. Yeah, there's just, even, like, I know Next Generation tried to be very social. I don't want to say social justice, because that wasn't invented yet, but, like, socially minded for issues at the time. And I know they tried to do the women's right episode in, I think it's season 1 or season 2. I think it was season 1 of Next Generation. And it might be the worst episode of all time for Star Trek. That weird one that has Sasha Yar centered in it. Oof, that's cringy. Fun to watch. Cringy. But yeah. So, if you guys don't have anything else, I'm going to probably call it a night here. And I will see you next week, and we'll have lots to talk about because of what the next episode is for our channel. Yeah, Star Wars literally is fairy tales. It really is. Also, sorry, I'm going to side chat this a little bit too. It just popped in my head. There was this person, I know a lot of people with the, not really spoilers, so Star Wars visions, how they don't like it because it's not really Star Wars, not really canon. Should probably do a whole episode and just talk about that. Maybe I'll start the next episode and talk about Star Wars visions. But anywho, that Star Wars isn't told exactly how it is because it's science fiction. It's not a historical. And because it's not a historical, it is like as if you ran into someone at a cantina and they were telling you the story. So basically you just figure how Hondo, of all people, is telling you the story of Star Wars. And that's why canon doesn't necessarily line up with each other. That's why sometimes characters change and sometimes certain things are over-exaggerated or under-exaggerated. And I think that's a good way how to look at Star Wars as a whole from a canon perspective, is that it's just a story that's being retold to you, and understanding that it's a fantasy slash fairy tale type story brings everything back under, like, don't get too serious about it. It's just a fairy tale story. So, that's about it. So, thank you guys for all hanging out with me tonight again. Hopefully you will enjoy our next episode next week and enjoy this one. If you haven't, go ahead and watch it. Probably we'll talk about Visions a little bit next week. I'm not an anime person, so I don't know super much about anime and won't draw those connections. I'll just talk to you about it as how I enjoy it. So, until next time, I'm John, and this is Ion Radio. Have a great night, everyone.